There is a quiet split forming in the creative world, one that will decide who continues to make things that matter and who disappears into the blur of infinite content. It will not be the rich versus the poor, nor the talented versus the mediocre. It will be the difference between those who still touch the world and those who only simulate it. For decades, the internet promised liberation. Anyone could share, anyone could build, anyone could be seen, and for a moment it felt true. But visibility has grown so cheap that it no longer carries meaning. The new scarcity is care. In the next few years, the creative field will fracture. Mass, algorithm fed productions on one side, and small rooted culture on the other. The former will flood the feeds, the latter will slowly become the new luxury, handmade, slow, and embedded in time. AI will finish what the smartphones have begun. It will make creation frictionless. Images, melodies, essays produced in seconds, customized for every taste at this point. The screen will be saturated with beauty that means nothing. The act of making will lose its aura because everyone will be able to do it. But abundance doesn't satisfy, it dilutes. When everything is beautiful, the word beautiful stops meaning anything. Audiences will begin craving what the machine cannot produce: the weight of origin. Who made this? Where was it touched, smelled, argued over? In a world of frictionless output, friction becomes the new authenticity. The metric of worth will shift from reach to root. We will start tracing art the way we trace wine, by region, season, lineage. The story of the hands involved will matter more than the numbers of views. A printmaker in Austin, a tailor in Tokyo, a DJ collective in Berlin, all tiny, local, but irreplaceable. This will outlast the mass-produced influencers. What we buy and admire will serve as proof that something real happened. Virality will look vulgar next to the quiet gravity of province. Instead of global movements, I think we're going to start seeing hundreds of micro scenes, maybe 30 to 200 people sharing rituals, listening nights, critique circles, swap meets, residencies in converted garages. These groups won't care about massive following, they'll care more about the trust, the craft, and the continuity. A musician who plays monthly at the same warehouse will have more cultural power than a playlist algorithm darling, because the audience in the room remembers how it felt, not how it performed online, and the internet will still exist, but more as an archive for these microscenes, not their whole home. When platforms wobble, as they, inevitably will, creators who own their channels will survive. Email lists, physical mailers, print catalogs, small membership clubs, community zines, these will all become the lifelines of authenticity. We're going to rediscover the dignity of the direct letter. The follower will become the subscriber, the consumer, the neighbor. Physical third places, which are like shops, studios, cafes, salons, will return as both workspace and sanctuary. They'll function like monasteries of craft, slower, smaller, and just more self-efficient. As AI flattens style, the human hand becomes this radical thing. Tailoring, set design, live painting, analog photography, sculptures, restorations, all these skills that require time inside matter will define value. What once looked old-fashioned will become a new subverse. The maker who stains their fingers with dye or resin will command more respect than the one who automates aesthetics. The future prestige object will not be the pristine digital render, but the imperfect, handmade objects that carry the trace of sweat and accident. In the age of attention, the star was the loudest person in the room. In the coming age, it will be the facilitator, the person who creates conditions for others to shine. Curators, hosts, moderators, community managers, event organizers, these people who understand human rhythm, who can design an experience that feels alive, they will quietly gain cultural power. The algorithm can recommend, but it just cannot host. The next great creative leaders won't be influencers, they're going to be custodians of atmosphere. Every digital revolution eventually forgets the body, and then it just rediscovers it in the exhaustion of it all. We are entering that fatigue right now as we speak. Screens made us omnipresent but bodiless. We can speak to everyone yet touch no one. The next generation of creatives will crave density again. The smell of ink, the buzz of the amplifiers, the tension of the unscripted crowds. Physical presence gives something algorithm just cannot mimic. Risk. In a room you can fail. You can be heckled, misunderstood, redeemed. The possibility of humiliation is what gives art its dignity. Online, failure is sanitized. It's into metrics at this point. It's offline. It just becomes this memory. As automations accelerate production, time itself becomes the rarest currency. The hours spent on garments, the month of a rehearsal, the years nurturing a scene, these become visible signs of seriousness. Audiences will begin to sense the time the way they sense texture. They'll know when something was rushed, when something was lived with. To move slowly in the next era will be the act of rebellion, a refusal to collapse human rhythm into a machine pace. Trust will replace hype. In a saturated world, attention loses value, but trust compounds. People will support creators who stay put, who keep showing up, whose taste matures in public. Small brands will act like friends, consistent, reachable, and transparent. The consumer becomes a participant, not a demographic. Art will feel less like a transaction and more like a mutual recognition. Beneath all of this lies a quiet moral shift. We are rediscovering that scale without soul is emptiness. The next creative revolution won't be aesthetic, it will be ethical. Artists will ask what clothes, using AI to sketch, then hand inking the final lines, maintaining an online archive but gathering every Thursday with real people. Their success will not be measured by numbers but by names, the people who keep showing up. And in the end, what we call the fractured future is just a creation relearning its original posture, human proximity. The artist of tomorrow will look a lot like the artist of the past, someone embedded in a place, attuned to its rhythm, accountable to faces they recognize. The tools will be newer, the tempo may be a little faster, but the desire will be ancient, to make something worth leaving behind. And maybe that's the real hope hidden inside the exhaustion, that all of our experiments with scale, we will finally remember what it means to be small and sincere. There was a time when creativity was a room before it was a career, a basement, a cafe, a garage, a club, a borrowed corner of someone's living room. Every movement began there, inside walls that held sweat, arguments, and cigarette smoke. Before the algorithm, there was the hallway. Before the platform, there was the place. When we left the room, something just left with us too. The internet gave us reach, but it just completely stripped art from where it actually came from. Geography used to shape imagination. Now everything is everywhere at once, and therefore nowhere. The street that birthed a sound, a style, has dissolved into digital air. Culture has just become this portable but placeless thing. The rooms of the past were imperfect, but they created things that the digital world cannot manufacture. Friction, apprenticeship, myth, memory. In the jazz clubs of Harlem, people invented new vocabularies because, they could hear each other, breathe, talk. In punk basements, kids learned ethics by borrowing amplifiers. Showing up, that friction served as a filter. It weeded out the lazy, the opportunistic, the bored. You have to want it enough to get on the bus, to show your face, to commit. And the internet erased that friction. It made participation easy, and therefore almost meaningless. And now everyone is invited, and yet no one is truly present now. And there's no risk in posting, right? There's no skin in the game. We confuse exposure with involvement. But friction was the crucible where belonging was forged. You trusted those who endured the same inconvenience. You respected those who kept showing up when it rained. And that shared inconvenience built moral gravity, and that sense that this thing we're doing matters. In digital culture, everyone is self-taught, and therefore no one is truly taught. The chain of mentorship has broken completely. Before, scenes, had elders, the printmakers in the corner, the DJs with hearing loss, the photographers who knew what not to do. They weren't influencers, they were witnesses. They passed down not only technique, but temperament. And now guidance is outsourced to strangers on YouTube, advice without intimacy. We learn the how, but not the why. And there's no one to say, hey, slow down, or that's not ready yet. Without elders, we mistake momentum for progress, attention for validation. And the result in all of this is abundance of output and the poverty of wisdom. We have students without teachers, scenes without lineage, art without ancestry. In the rooms of the past, you could fail in peace. You could be terrible for just a long time. And that privacy was the sacred stage of becoming. Every artist needs a cocoon before they can emerge. The internet killed that cocoon. Every sketch, every rough draft, every offhand thought is now public property. We no longer grow in secret, we debut prematurely, and we are applauded way too early, criticized too fast, and cemented too soon. The pressure to appear formed breeds of self-consciousness. We perform our potential instead of nurturing it. And when you are seen before you're ready, you spend years trying to live up to this version of yourself that just was never real. Physical scenes once produced dialects, right? Distinct aesthetics born from a place. The denim of Okayama, the fonts of Zurich, the colors of Mexico City. All these dialects gave art texture. You could look at a work and just know where it came from. Globalization has flattened that. Everyone pulls from the same references, the same mood boards, the same trending palettes. We've built a culture of remix without root. The global creative now just speaks Esperanto of style, pleasant, competent, or forgettable. We have gained access but lost accent. The world looks increasingly uniform, even as individuality is worshipped. But the irony of the internet is that it gave everyone a voice and made them all just sound alike. The disappearance of physical communities has psychologically, consequences. We rarely name of them. Without rooms, we lose orientation. We don't know where we are in the larger story of art and culture. There's no hierarchy, no feedback, no slow path from outsider to insider. Everything's happening everywhere all at once, and the result is this sense of floating, right? We feel disconnected, masquerading as freedom. We also lost belonging. Digital groups are large but very, very thin. We can gather thousands of eyes, but no real witnesses, and we are known but not held. And without shared physical time, I think our nervous system drifts kind of out of sync. Online connection is very cognitive, but it's not biological. The body never receives the signals of being safe, seen, and understood. And it's no wonder so many creators like you and me feel anxious, even when supported. The brain registers numbers, but the body registers isolation. The loss of rooms is not just a cultural, it's somatic. We are lonely on a cellular level. Another wound that I should pick at is the Iraq we can mute, unfollow, but in real rooms, we had to learn grace. We had to coexist with difference. The friction that shaped moral intelligence. The internet removed the moral gymnasium of presence. And now we exercise outrage instead of empathy. We are surrounded by opinions that starved of understandings, and the distance between strangers has collapsed. But the distance between souls have never been wider. Physical communities gave something that digital world cannot: witness. To be witnessed is not the same as being watched. Watching is passive, extractive. Witnessing and participatory, reverent. When you performed in a room, people saw you, not your projections. They saw your sweat, maybe you stumbled and you just recovered. And they saw the full spectrum of your becoming. And that gaze shaped you, and not through judgment, but through presence. Online audience watched just the final cut, not the process. They see outcomes, not growths. And so, artists lose that mirror that shows them who they truly are in motion. We just have become static avatars that are incredibly well lit, perfectly captioned, and spiritually malnourished. And even now, the ghost of the room lingers. You feel it when you hear a live band that makes your chest vibrate. When you stand in a small gallery and you can smell the paint. When a stranger at a flea market tells you the story behind a patch on a jacket. All of these are the last remaining portals to reality. They reminded us that creativity was never meant to be efficient. It was meant to be embodied. It was meant to gather the living around something that could be, a discovery, and everything just slowly becomes a strategy at this point. The algorithm rewards frequency, not depth. Predictability, not risk. So we have learned slowly to flatten our edges, to post faster, to explain ourselves before anyone can ask. And we become interpreters of our own mystery. And I think this is the first tragedy of the digital age. We spend so much time clarifying who we are that we kind of forgot to just be. Online, every audience is every audience at once. Friends, enemies, clients, exes, strangers, we create a self that can survive them all. The self that is cautious, frictionless, market safe. The nuance that gives character to humanity becomes a liability at this point. In the physical world, we were different people in different rooms. One version in the studio, another in a conversation, another in solitude. Now, those selves collapse into just one flattened projection. But no soul can live long inside a brand. To stay coherent, we amputate contradictions. We censor instincts. We perform stability. The self just becomes this product designed to offend no one and inspire everyone. An impossible geometry that leaves the artist hollow. And we become polished ghosts haunting our own profiles. Digital communities promised inclusions, but they were built on gamified loyalty. Likes, shares, badges, followers, counts, all of these things, they simulate intimacy while breeding competition. Belonging becomes something you measure instead of just feeling. Inside these ecosystems, dissent feels like betrayal. Nuance is punished because algorithms cannot interpret uncertainty. So, communities evolve into echo chambers of light but shallow. We drift between servers, group chats, and collaborations that feel meaningful until the next distraction arrives. I don't think we have never been so connected yet so disposable to one another. We mistake circulation for community. But movement without memory is not belonging, it's just drifting. Creators now live on this one-sided intimacy with hundreds or thousands of strangers. Audiences feel like they know them, right? Creators must carry that illusion with grace. Every post is both confession and customer service. And this imbalance, kind of corridors authenticity. Artists feel responsible for maintaining emotional stability. And not just in their work, but in their viewers. They become caretakers of invisible crowds. It's a soft kind of captivity, one where, applause feels like pressure and silence feels like exile. Many quietly confessed that they don't want to be famous, they just want neighbors in a way. But the machine offers only fans. When every gesture must be witnessed, the boundary between self and image dissolves. We begin to observe our lives instead of living them. Moments are pre-edited in the mind for future posting. We become directors of our own existence, unable to improvise. And this is going to lead us to objectifying ourselves. Speaking about oneself in marketing terms, my brand, my engagement, my reach, until the personhood feels secondary. Attention hypervigilance, a nervous system trained to check metrics the way a soldier checks the horizon. Identity diffusion, shifting tone, style, opinion to suit each algorithmic wave that comes through until the original impulse dissolves. Loneliness inside of visibility, the paradox of being surrounded by watchers but starved of witnesses. The artist's body carries all of this tension, all of this anxiety. And this just becomes chronic. Rest feels unsafe. The nervous system learns that existence equals presence. performance, and quiet equals death. Digital life tricks us into confusing activity with progress. Every post feels like a movement, every view like the digital age will eventually collapse under its own weight, and what will remain are the islands of trust, micro scenes anchored in human rhythm. The irony is that technology, which once promised expansion, will end up delivering these contractions. Smaller groups, deeper bonds, and fewer but truer exchanges. The artist of the coming decade will be bilingual. I think they're going to be very fluent in code and in touch. I think we're going to start treating platforms like tools, not mirrors. Their studio will be hybrid, half screen, half table. Their audience is half remote, half local. What they make will not need to trend because it already belongs, to a neighborhood, a community, to a handful of people, to a time that can be smelled and remembered. The digital world will continue to accelerate, but these artists, I think, are going to move like deep divers. Slow, deliberate, pressure resistant. They're going to understand that meaning is formed not in exposure but in endurance. To resist today doesn't require rage, it requires presence. To meet people in person, to answer slowly, in tempo. The artist of tomorrow will log off not to disappear but to arrive. And perhaps we needed to go this far to drown in attention, to remember that attention is not the same as love. We mistook the glow for warmth, the crowd for communion, the metric for meaning. But the human spirit is stubborn. It will always seek what machines cannot give: slowness, presence, and touch. Every creative generation rediscovers the same truth under different disguises. That art is not content, that community is not a feed, and that no amount of data can replace the feeling of being in a room with people who understand. And when that realization finally settles across the culture, when the exhaustion becomes too loud to ignore, we'll begin to rebuild the rooms we left behind. Small, local, honest, and alive.